Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Power Up, Impacting and Influencing Women in Education. I am Dr. Francine Edwards from Delaware State University, and we are excited that you have chosen to join us this morning. I am the Dean of the College of Humanities, Education, and Social Sciences at Delaware University, and I am joined by two of my colleagues and our collaborating partner, Tanya Brown.
I am Tanya Michelle Brown, founder of Professor Brown LLC, and as a cross-disciplinary professor, speaker, and author, my passion is connecting with women in education to encourage positive change, professional and personal growth. I am delighted to partner with Delaware State University for this amazing conference, all of our panelists, and I thank each of you for joining us today. Welcome.
I'm Dr. Crystal Timmons, the Director of the Office of Clinical and Field Experiences for the Department of Education at Delaware State University. Today is such an exciting engagement opportunity. We have assembled an outstanding panel of speakers that are here to power you up. While our lineup of presenters has changed just a bit because of some unforeseen circumstances, we are energized and ready for what today has to offer. The educational landscape has always been challenging, but the pandemic has put those challenges under a microscope. The educators you will hear from today are change agents in their own right. We hope that you will walk away from today's virtual event inspired to do even more.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Dr. Shelley Rouser, the chair of the Department of Education at Delaware State University. I've been in the trenches for more than 2 decades, involved in education reform and working with grassroots level educators and families to deliver quality education to all children. Today's keynote speaker shares the same passion. Brandi Davis has been an educator for 21 years. She received both her undergraduate and graduate degrees from the University of Akron. Her passion for urban public education has directed her to lead schools and innovative approaches immersed in culturally responsive teaching practices. Outside of work, Brandi is committed to strengthening her community, and as she leads outreach activities through her church and sorority. She is the daughter of the late Edward Francis Jr. and Linda Davis, brother Antoine, and nephew Trey. She enjoys watching football, traveling, and reading. Her favorite quote is, "I am the dream and the hope of the slave." Please welcome our keynote speaker from the I Promise School, Akron Public Schools and Lebron James Family Foundation, Principal Brandi Davis.
Good morning, thank you. So I would like to thank Dr. Francine Tolliver Edwards, Dr. Shelley Rouser, and Professor Tanya M. Brown and Delaware State University for inviting me to speak to you this morning. Today, I am here to encourage you, to inspire you, and to let you know that you are not in this alone. All of us at one point or another have faced obstacles at work because we are women. Many more of us have faced even more adversity because we are Black women. I intend to share words of wisdom with you that will encourage you to never allow your fire or passion for learning and growth to be extinguished by anything or anyone. No matter what goals you want to achieve or type of life you want to create for yourself, inspiration is the fuel you need to forge ahead. The road to greatness is not paved. Sometimes it's not even a road. Having inspiration allows us to stay focused on our life's journey so that we can stand confidently in our purpose to achieve greatness. Now, I know this is a Women in Education conference, so I will share what you should be doing in your workplace. You should have a diversity, equity, and inclusion strategic plan that overhauls your human resource department, that emphasizes hiring qualified Black and Brown people, one that takes a closer look at data-driven student assessments to ensure that educators aren't the one creating the achievement gap, and one that holds staff and employees accountable for not just receiving the training, but also understanding and implementing the work of diversity, equity, and inclusion. You should seek out systems of oppression and systemic racism in education and be unapologetic in your quest to not only demand change, but also to create new systems of equity. You should integrate culturally responsive teaching practices into your curriculum to ensure that you are sending well-versed, empathetic global citizens out into the world to truly create change. You should challenge the antiquated 20th century traditional approach to education. Buck the status quo. Lead that innovative change on what authentic, student-centered learning is all about. This is no small feat. In order to become this ingenious, cutting-edge educator, you must personify a certain temperament, a certain mannerism, and that certain essence. That, ladies, is what I'm going to discuss this morning: how to cultivate your flavor. Cultivate as in prepare, cultivate as in develop, cultivate as in to foster growth. Now, your flavor is your sense of who you are. Deep down, your flavor is your identity, the totality of who you are, your unconscious and your conscious and your unconscious, as well as your mental and physical being. In order to lead all of this monumental change in education, you have to cultivate your flavor. So this morning, I am going to discuss 4 flavors that are a must, that you must cultivate to lead such an enormous change in your workplace. First, you must be strong. In order to be the change agent in education, you have to develop thick skin, have perseverance and grit to face the many no's, naysayers, and negative Natashas that are going to come your way. A strong woman has an awareness of the obstacles in her way and the misogynistic expectations people have for her, but she decides for herself what she wants and works to achieve it. Furthermore, a strong woman is willing to find help or gain strength from supportive friends, family members, and mentors, despite the notion that women should be quote unquote independent and do it all. A strong woman is self-aware. She continually tries to overcome her fears. She knows how to control herself, and she is patient no matter the situation. Being a strong woman doesn't mean you can't ask for help. Being a strong woman means that you're someone who is realistic enough to know what you can do, is grounded enough to know when you need a hand, and is confident enough to know that you can ask for help without fear of being judged. Most importantly, a strong woman isn't selfish, and once she makes it, she reaches back to help others. A strong woman is confident, yes, but the way to best describe a woman's strength is a sense of confident humility paired with faith and passion. By confident humility, I just mean someone that isn't so humble that she comes across as weak. Rather, she can stay confident without getting arrogant. A strong woman is someone who isn't afraid to share her opinions and speak her truth. She listens, but doesn't allow others' problems to bring her down. She is filled with kindness, generosity, compassion, integrity, a willingness to be vulnerable, and is authentic. No matter what, she is true to herself. That, ladies, is the flavor of strength. The next flavor is to be valiant. And if you're church-going women, I think you know where I'm going with this. It takes courage to lead innovative change in education, especially when people are so used to doing things the same way because they've always been done that type of way before. You have to be the one to fight against systems that fuel the achievement gap in education. Courageous leaders not only talk about change, but they develop action plans for plan A as well as a plan B, just in case. Courageous women are not deterred. There will be many obstacles thrown in their paths, but they accept the challenge because it only makes them more tenacious and agile. A strong woman faces challenges, stands up for herself, and refuses to stay silent in abuse of power. Scary? Yes. Necessary? Absolutely. Recognize your journey and stay the course. Identify what it will take for you to reach your goals and what is keeping you from reaching them. Courageous women aren't afraid to be labeled as the black sheep. They don't think twice about choosing the road less traveled. Doors open when you close others. That means you'll need to say no to opportunities that don't feel 100% aligned with your goals. The more you draw boundaries while pursuing the path that's right for you, the braver you'll feel with each passing day. Courageous women don't just accept the red carpet or cleared path, they roll it out for the next group of women. By taking what you've learned and sharing it, by teaching, mentoring, or simply opening the door, you help strengthen your core purpose as you see your journey reflected in others. Malala Yousafzai said, "Raise up my voice, not so that I can shout, but so that those without a voice can be heard." Now that you've added the flavor of strength and valiance, now you must be fearless. Fearless women speak up, and not just for themselves. Fearless women believe in justice. When they bear witness to unwarranted attacks, nasty or ignorant comments, look out. You are going to hear about that. They aren't afraid to be provocative either. It's not just about causing unnecessary commotions, but about shaking things up to keep people thinking and situations progressing. These are the women who will challenge conventional wisdom with pleasure, step up, and remind you that it's a woman's right to choose anything for herself and will fight for the underdog as well. Fearless women don't care what they should do, whether it's getting married, having a baby, dressing a certain kind of way, or any of the dozen other rules that society tries to place on them. These women make daily decisions to do what they want, when they want to do it, and how they want to do it. Fearless women believe in themselves. They take a good look at their history and all of what they have overcome and are proud of their growth. They know that they can take care of themselves, come what may. If they feel they can't, they do what they need to do in order to acquire the skills and support they need to feel safe. Fearless women make a conscious effort to fear less. I'm going to say that again. Fearless women make a conscious effort to fear less. These women are not walking around with a gladiator type of confidence, but these fearless women take a good look at their fears. If it's not a serious threat with real consequences, like a dark alley on a late night, they push themselves to step forward and give it a go. That could mean pushing themselves to challenge educational policy on the House floor, or to incorporate restorative practices to eliminate the school to prison pipeline. By doing this, women are not only invoking necessary change, but also building their confidence through tangible examples of their own courage. Do it, girl. Be fearless. Finally, what I feel is the most important flavor is to know that you are enough. This is the most important flavor to cultivate. Know that you cannot pour from an empty cup. Know that you cannot change the face of education feeling empty or mentally and physically exhausted. By nature, women nurture and take care of everyone else, often forgetting to take care of themselves. Women, if you are able, please close your eyes, relax your minds, and receive this mindful message. Take a deep breath in and exhale out. Take another deep breath in and exhale out. Ladies, know that you are enough, just as you are right in this very moment. You are full of sparkle and compassion. You genuinely want to make the world a better place. You practice kindness. You are not afraid of the truth. You are loyal. You are adventurous. You are supportive. You are a woman who accepts her imperfections. You are enough. You make mistakes, but you own them and you learn from them. You are a mama. You are a sister. You are an auntie. You are a daughter. You are a mentor. You are an educator. You are a leader. You are a powerful woman beyond measure. Ladies, you are enough. You are enough. Open your eyes. Speak it into existence. You are enough. Ladies, it is up to you to cultivate your flavors, to be strong, to be valiant, to be fearless, and to be enough. Receive these attributes and add them like jewels to your crown. Never remove jewels from your crown to make it lighter for someone else to carry. Again, never remove jewels from your crown to make it lighter for someone else to carry. Instead, surround yourself with people, organizations, and systems who can handle the weight of your crown and appreciate the overwhelming flavors of your being. Cast out any doubt and appreciate the overwhelming flavors of you. Cast out any insecurities. Cast out any uncertainties that will take you off your path of changing the face of education. Ladies, I want to encourage you. I want to inspire you to be true to who you are. From this moment moving forward, please make a promise to others that you will lead and make an impactful change in your educational organizations. Lastly, make a promise to yourselves that you will always remember to cultivate your flavor. Thank you so much for having me this morning.
Thank you so much, Principal Davis, for such a motivational message. I am ready to cultivate my flavor, and no one is getting these jewels out of my crown. What you and your colleagues have been able to do in Akron should be a model for the world as we work to educate the whole child and families. Again, thank you. We're going to get our power session started with our first presenter. Ebony Shields received her undergraduate degree in 1997 from South Carolina State University, where she graduated with honors as an early childhood education major. Upon graduation, she began her career with Prince George's County Public School System, where she has taught grades ranging from pre-kindergarten to the 4th grade. Ebony furthered her educational career by receiving her master's degree from Western Maryland College. She has also worked as a professional developer for Achievement First in Baltimore, Maryland. Ebony then served as a reading specialist, at which time she became the Teacher of the Year for Prince George's County Public School System. Ebony has also served as a principal and is a certified Gallup Strengths Finders coach. Ebony is currently the instructional director, principal supervisor for Prince George's County. Please give a round of applause or snaps and help me welcome Ms. Ebony Shields with our power session number 1. She's Got Power, Lessons in Leadership.
Good morning and welcome to She's Got the Power, Lessons in Leadership. As noted previously, I am Ebony Shields and I am humbled and honored by the opportunity to share time and space with you today. I would like to take this opportunity to thank Dr. Edwards, Professor Brown, and the Delaware State University faculty for the opportunity to be before you today. So let's start by discussing the importance of leading with your why. Know your why and lead with it. Simon Sinek proclaims that you should lead with your why. In his book, Start with the Why, he discusses the key to success for some of the most accomplished corporations. While we don't often adopt business models in education, I would argue that we could learn a lot from the apples of the world. You see, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. I want you to take a moment and think about your why. Why do you do this work? I want you to ponder on the following questions. Who inspires you to engage in this work every day? How do you inspire others in this work every day? And what inspires you to engage in this work every day? And then finally, can the people that you touch with your practice Feel your why in your leadership. Now, if I would like for you to take a moment and drop your why in the chat. So for those of you who are here with us now, just take a moment and drop your why in the chat for me. Or you can write it on your own in your private time or place. So we have my mentor is my why, Mr. Vincent L. Fisher, an equitable learning system for all children, my family, absolutely. So thank you for sharing. The future, my scholars and my community. Helping other first gens like me, absolutely. So I'm imagining that there are some of you that have been inspired by great educators, or maybe not so great educators. Or maybe it was a family member, neighbor, or professor, or just simply your inherent belief about why you were placed on this earth. Why do I do this work? I always wanted to be an educator. I was the child who played school with my dolls, my friends and family members. And of course, I was always the teacher or the principal. And at a deeper level, my why is driven by my commitment to populations who have been marginalized. I believe that it is my purpose to create equity and access for children who may not otherwise have a voice. And despite some who may have advised me to explore other more lucrative careers, my family has always supported my endeavors. And I felt in my heart that if I walked in my purpose, my fiscal needs would be met, and I've never been disappointed. Your why should wake you up in the morning, and sometimes it even keeps you up at night. It's the thing that drives you to make tough decisions and stand confidently in them. Your why is what pushes you to be your best, even on your toughest days. Next slide, please. For our consideration, Simon Sinek has also provided us with this model of the golden circle. On the outer ring of the golden circle, you'll notice the what. The what is every organization on the planet, and individuals know what they do. These are products that they sell or services they offer, or in our case in education, our output is the success or lack thereof of our children. The how is some organizations know how they do it. These are the things that make them special or set them apart from their competition. And then at the center, or I like to say at the heart of the golden circle, is your why. Very few organizations and sometimes people know why they do what they do. Why is not about making money. That's a result. Why is a purpose, cause, or belief. It's the very reason your organization or you exist. Your why is what people see externally as passion. Inspiring leaders are game changers. They are able to influence, stand out and up, have significant impact, and can envision a future that is better than the current reality. Leaders firmly establish the why and serve as the model of excellence. Managers help to drive the why by being the how. And finally, employees manifest the what. Here are a few quotes that I want to leave you. Allow these to resonate with you as you lead. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And what you do simply proves what you believe. There are only two ways to influence human behavior. You can manipulate it or you can inspire it. I hope you want to be one who inspires. And then finally, Working hard for something we don't care about is called stress. And I don't know about you, but I don't want to live day to day being stressed out. Working harder for something we love is called passion. And that passion is directly connected to your why. I encourage you to identify, adopt, and lean confidently into your why. And then there are the beatitudes of leadership. As a leader of a department, school, district, or organization, you have to make some pretty tough decisions that may not always be popular. These attitudes of leadership will allow you to stay grounded in your why. First, be passionate and purposeful. Allow your passion to drive your decisions and keep you focused. Your passion can become contagious as a result of your team, and as a result, your team will reach great heights and conquer your goals, thus supporting your ultimate mission and vision. Secondly, be intentional. Consider your leadership footprint. As you walk in leadership, always think about the legacy you want to leave behind. Wherever you walk, you will always leave a footprint. With every decision you make and action you take, you leave an impact. These are your leadership footprints. And whether conscious or unconscious, these footprints have massive impact, not only on your future, but also the future of teams and organizations which you lead. You can think of a footprint as what you will be remembered for the day you leave. It is not just the sum of your short-term accomplishments and achievements and day-to-day tasks, but the sum total of your impact. And lastly, be unwavering, unapologetic, yet humble. Don't make your voice small. Sometimes as women, we feel like we have to walk in the shadow. Don't ever feel like you have to dim your light to let others shine. Or as Brandi Davis shared with us, you don't have to take the jewels out of your crown to make it light for others to carry. I like that. Know when, why, and how to use your voice. Now, being a leader again can be tiring and very lonely sometimes. But when you are doing what's right, you can stand right in it and confidently. The more people see you walk in your truth and manifest your why, the more willing they will be to follow you. Next slide, please. Now let's talk about honoring yourself. See, it's germane to women for us to be nurturers. We are wives, mothers, daughters, aunties, godmommies, sisters, rock stars in education and beyond. We have been cultured to take care of everyone but ourselves. I affectionately refer to this as the S on the chest syndrome. You know, the Superwoman syndrome. We are even applauded and honored for our continuous sacrifice. Know that it's okay to take the S off your chest. You are human. Listen to your mind, body, and spirit. Self-care is the best care. And it took me a while to understand that big, small thing. I have the pleasure of supervising 21 elementary school principals. And I always tell them that you can only be as good to others as you are to yourself. Whether it's taking a day off every month or two, taking yourself to dinner and or a movie, spending time with your heartbeats, and treating yourself to a monthly subscription at your favorite spa, which was my favorite pre-COVID, taking a yoga class, or just engaging in, small moments of tranquility at your favorite park. We must take care of ourselves. Part of Honoring yourself is managing your time and not allowing your time to manage you. There's a saying that goes that youth is wasted on the young, and I would argue that so is time. Time is one of the most precious commodities we have. Once it's gone, it can never be recovered. Use your time meaningfully in your professional and your personal lives. And don't slip into a state of guilt when you advocate for yourself. Self-advocacy is another form of honoring yourself. There is nothing wrong with expressing your professional and personal needs. A strong woman knows who she is, what she wants, and isn't afraid to advocate for it. Next slide, please. Now, you have to be willing to grow and grow others. It is said that iron sharpens iron, and that we are much stronger as a unit than we are as a silo. An effective and impactful leader is willing to grow and grow others. Never stop being a seed. Soak up new learning and don't take pride in always being the smartest person in the room. That merely speaks to the fact that your room is not large enough. Expand your territory. There should be wise counsel in your professional world that you can consult to stretch and prune you so that you are constantly evolving. Marian Wright Elderman proclaims that service is the rent we pay for being. It is our duty to be gardeners and pour into the lives of others. Don't be afraid to build someone else's capacity. None of us, and I state that again, none of us elevated to where we are without the support of someone. Don't be self-deceived by your success. Always remember the name or names of those individuals that poured into you and carry them with you as you become a master gardener, because to whom much is given, much is required. As I close, I want you to think about the most impactful leader you ever served under. What was it that made you want to follow them? What about their practice allowed you to trust that the decisions they made were ones that you were willing to follow? See, there is formal and informal leadership. The formal title, that you're a CEO, supervisor, principal, chair, etc. And then there is informal authority, the permission that people grant you when you have gained their trust and they willingly follow you. I want you to think about your leadership style today. Is it indicative of the leadership footprint that you would like to leave? How will you lead in a way that others will confidently follow your lead? Walk in a way that people willingly grant you permission to lead. And with that, I leave you with this quote. There are leaders and there are those who lead. Leaders hold a position of power or influence. Those who lead inspire us. Whether individuals or organizations, we follow those who lead not because we have to, but because we want to. Thank you for spending time with me today. And remember that the power to lead resides in each of you. You've got the power. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Ebony Shields. What a message. Thank you for helping us start this day reflecting on and grounded in our why. Kendall Lawson is our next speaker. She is the co-founder of OWL Education Company, LLC, an educational startup which develops ed tech and curriculum and content for traditional and real-world educators. Her team designs and develops educational games, instructional resources, online courses, and professional development opportunities for schools, nonprofits, and businesses. Mrs. Lawson is passionate about making sure that students have access to equitable education that equips them to overcome trauma, and social barriers, and more importantly, the need to better equip teachers to deal with the level of need that they will face in schools. Please welcome Kenda Lawson with her Power Up session on responsive pedagogy.
Good morning. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak. I have the privilege and really the responsibility to speak today about responsive pedagogy. I have a little laryngitis, so I'll say that, but since I've been blessed to be able to keep my voice just enough to be here with you guys today, if I leave here with no voice, then I'll know that I at least left it all with you. So my presentation today is called Power Up Your Pedagogy. And that wasn't just a happy coincidence or a choice that I made in order to coordinate with this conference. I truly believe that it is the responsibility of every educator to provide their students with culturally relevant content that is born of empathy and rigorous expectation, and that inspires self-efficacy in response to challenges. I call these cultures superhero cultures. Now, these aren't to be confused with putting an S on your chest, right? And being a lone superhero. This is about every stakeholder in a school, in a district, in a community, being a part of this process. Next slide. So let's define culture and examine how it affects the way that we learn and the way that we teach. We'll discover what responsiveness looks like and how we can be responsive in a way that is both flexible and feel safe. Next slide. So people often have difficulty distinguishing between ideas like race, ethnicity, and nationality. While race is an external and a social construct, that a label really that's placed on people without their choice, ethnicity is internal, still a social construct, but with internal influences, mechanisms of individual choice that are included. And then you have nationality, which is really just a product of circumstance. So it's not unheard of, right? It's not a mistake then that people get confused by these things. In fact, ideas like race didn't even exist until 1776. And it was only then bought in wholesale as a convenient justification for slavery. Yet the idea of these divisions is a long-running theme in the narratives that we formed around our nations and ourselves. And there are consequences. Just because race isn't real doesn't mean that racism isn't. So it's no surprise that it's difficult to find a working definition of culture, which is more personal, but is still constructed. We tend to describe culture by examining the surface level, what people wear, how we dance, the things that we can see. But it's the unobservable factors that form the basis for students' worldviews that are important for informing teachers about how to teach in culturally responsive ways. That the idea of these divisions, next slide. So if someone asked you to describe your identity to them, where would you begin? And I'd love for you guys to drop those comments in the comment section. Share how you define yourself if somebody asks you who you are. Would it come down to your skin color, your nationality, the language that you speak, your religion, your cultural traditions, or your family ancestry? The fact that I'm talking to teachers lets me know probably your job is a big part of that too. Our culture, along with our experiences, shape everything from how we interpret arts to the assumptions that we make, all right? To even how close we stand, right? Which is something that we're kind of discovering now. It's a thing, right? A colleague I met on Clubhouse by the name of Vinod Nair, he described a research study they were conducting on preschool age kids. They asked 136 teachers, and for research, they reference them, they're all white females. They asked these teachers to watch videos of 4 children, one a black boy, one a black girl, one a white boy, and one a white girl, as they played together, and to identify problematic behavior. The teachers were asked to press enter while watching if they noticed any negative behavior. They also were monitored, their eye movement was monitored to see where they were looking most of the time. And out of the group, of course, the teachers identified problematic behavior, most in the black boy, next often in the white boy, then in the Black girl and the white girl. This data revealed that there were biases, not only in relation to race, but also gender. All right, when asked about the disparity, the teacher cited reasons, right? Things that they probably heard in trainings on being culturally sensitive or trauma aware. They said that the Black boy was likely from a broken home, that he had been poorly socialized. But here's the thing. Behavioral and child psychologists had reviewed the same video and found not one negative or inappropriate behavior for the students' ages. And when they were confronted with this, the teachers were shocked, of course. Nobody likes to believe that they have these biases, that they see the world through a certain lens. But I will say that one positive and shining moment was that when all of these teachers were offered the opportunity to withdraw their data, only one decided to do so. They understood how important it was for us to have these conversations. And so I want you to really pause and reflect about what each of these aspects of our cultural lens, what they say about us, but also how they influence what we think and what we say about others. We find that it's a lot easier to empathize and understand people who look alike. But these divisions, right, or at least the appearance of these divisions are dangerous because they overemphasize the differences while allowing us to excuse that the fact that we share way more in common than we do differences. Next slide. So this story highlights what Chimamanda Adichie calls the danger of a single story in her TED Talk. It also reveals what happens when we end our training with being trauma-informed or culturally aware without equipping teachers to meet the individual experiences of our students with empathy and empowerment. Educators don't just need to be culturally responsive. They need to be responsive to socioeconomic conditions. They need to be emotionally responsive, and they need to be trauma responsive. Unfortunately, when we're not responsive to these needs, school becomes its own source of trauma. I need to acknowledge here the collective trauma that we've all actually endured over the last year. No time is better than now to really show ourselves and show our students some empathy, some grace and empathy. Which brings me to something else that I have to acknowledge. It would be really easy to just assume and dismiss this one story, right? Because of the demographics of the teachers they chose. But the truth is, I'm a member of a professional organization that is just for Black educators. And I was amazed this year at some of the comments and posts about the excuses that parents were making for their students not turning in their work. Excuses like, he's having to do his schoolwork on a phone. The internet was down. Or, I'm sick and she's my caregiver. Now, the thing about this is, if we really listened with an open heart, these are experiences that some of us are also going through, that many people in the world right now are having to deal with. And we really have to do a good job of making sure that we are equipped. Somebody said actually that we are filled up so that we can show empathy and compassion and we can fill up our students. The quote down at the bottom is an important one, and I'll say it and I'll pause for us to reflect on it. That trauma is one of the most urgent human rights and social justice issues of our time. We all need to do our part to ensure that school does not become a place that contributes to this. We can start to address these issues with what are called wraparound cultures. What a researcher named Bronfenbrenner's theory on ecological systems describe as complex systems of relationships where all stakeholders form multiple levels of support around children and practice the principles that you see here in this graphic. But one important thing to remember about this is this system is that power and energy and love and care has to flow through the system towards the child. It is impossible to skip over stakeholders in between. The only way that we can power up students and classrooms is to ensure that educators stay energized and feel supported. So what is clear is that the pandemic has affected different groups differently. Now, And so what I'm speaking about today is not about ignoring these differences. It's about celebrating them and recognizing the strengths and the opportunities that each student has in relation to learning. We can use these differences to drive conversations into deeper, more meaningful, and more impactful places. Even as this affirms us, it gives us agency in a way that enables us to discover how much connects us and those connections enable us to be charged up and to energize each other. So responsive teaching is the moment-to-moment decisions that you make when you observe and analyze your students' needs, communicate clearly with high quality expectations, relevant text, and use these things to inform your next moves. Next slide. So responsive teaching is not defined by having positive intentions. It's about well-designed practices that lead to positive academic, social, and emotional outcomes for students, taking into account their strengths and their needs. Next slide. So let's talk about some characteristics of responsive classrooms. In responsive classrooms, teachers teach social and emotional skills along with academic content. They focus on how we teach as much as what we teach, right? And I think that's going to be a theme because your how is important as well. Promotes growth through social interactions. They cultivate great cultures as well as individual competence. They realize that what we know and believe about our students informs our response to those students, and that affects their outcomes. And finally, responsive classrooms and responsive schools partner with families to form and community members to form wraparound cultures. Next slide. Now, in order to accomplish these goals, we do have to do some work. We have to avoid some common mistakes and misconceptions about responsive pedagogy. One common misconception is that it's the same as multicultural and social justice education, but it isn't. That's an important factor and a component that all of our teachers should be competent in, but that's not the end of the story either, right? We have to recognize, we have to accept, and again, celebrate those differences. But at the end of the day, again, it's not about intentions, it's about outcomes. Another misconception is that it must start with implicit bias training. Now, in the study that I mentioned, of course, there's some work that the district is going to need to be able to do. But every single person, you and I, we all actually see things through that cultural lens. We all have implicit biases that we need to reflect on. Now, this doesn't have to be the first step in this process. This is a really difficult one. It's one that sometimes naturally evolves and happens out of the course of, receiving great training and having the opportunity to really discuss and reflect upon this. So it does have to be a part, but it doesn't have to be the first part. So if you're finding it really difficult to sort of start these conversations, maybe start somewhere else, but make sure you come back to it. Another misconception is that it's all about building positive relationships and self-esteem. This is what I call the empathy error. Some teachers walk into classrooms, and because they are trauma aware or they're culturally sensitive, we don't take the step from translating that from our empathy for kids into, well, how do I show them a way out? The last thing that I'll say is a misconception that we definitely need to address is that culturally responsive pedagogy is all about choosing the right strategies. It won't be. We're going to make mistakes. And one of the things that we're going to see in the system that I'm going to explain is that you have to have flexibility to do that. Sometimes you're going to meet a student and you're going to try a strategy and it won't work. And so it's going to be important for us to remain flexible and not just be focused on the right strategies, but making sure that teachers have a toolbox and that they are empowered to use all of those tools in order to meet the needs of their students. Next slide. So I'd like to leave you with this, right? Responsive pedagogy is equity in action. It's empathy for students' experiences and empowering them in their identity. And for each of these goals here, you see in the chart, it has its place, okay? But responsive pedagogy, which you'll see on the end, focuses on improving and accelerating learning while pushing back on dominant narratives about people of color. And so sometimes when we are very woke, right, and we want to talk about social justice, and we bring up, we think we've done that job when we introduce texts that talk about these themes and ideas. Again, the important thing and the empowering thing is to give students a recourse, a course of action, something that shows them that this might be the world today, but it doesn't have to be the world tomorrow. Next slide. And so a framework for building responsive classrooms should include each of these components. But remember that building superhero cultures requires flexibility to establish inclusion, develop positive attitudes, and enhance meeting and engender competence in our students. Next slide. To wrap it up, so if you're going to put on the cape, right, if you're going to accept the challenge of creating superhero cultures, I want you to just remember, right, I'm going to make it simple. Just remember to create a powerful experience for students by responding with empathy and empowerment. Thank you.
Thank you, Kenda. That was an amazing presentation. I have to say, I've been taking notes and flipping. This has been a good morning, a good start to our morning. So thank you, Kenda, for that presentation. I was taking some notes, and I do have a question for you. And this is for any of the other educators that are on. Should teaching about trauma, social justice, cultural responsiveness, should this be elevated to a federal level so that every city, state, region, college, university is not doing different stuff, but that we're doing something that is measured, data-driven, and that will work, and that in some instances you may need to tweak for your community, but there's an umbrella by which everyone is leading by. What are your thoughts about that? And that's to you and everyone else on the panel.
Absolutely. And I'm going to invite everybody else to kind of join in here. But I think that it definitely is a conversation and a framework that we have to have in place from a national level, and it should pervade our cultures all the way down to students. We all have to take the time and the opportunity to really consider, again, our own cultural lens, right? It's a big part of who we are and how we see the world. And so it influences and affects how we see each other. So of course, it's going to influence how we teach our kids. And so what I'm finding sometimes, I'm writing a book called Activating Kids' Superpowers on the same topic, is that there are some very well-intentioned people, right, at governments, at states, local, even in school boards and things across our country and in our classrooms, right? I spoke about those teachers, and I'm pretty sure each and every one of those teachers who go into classroom, who teach in areas that serve disadvantaged kids, I'm positive that they didn't go into this study thinking that they had any bias, right? I work with these kids. I love these kids. And yet, I'm very conditioned to see other people's behaviors, and some of them are just cultural. Some of them, again, were just non-existent. You told me to look for problematic behavior, and I looked, right? I have to feel like it's like how police officers are told to write tickets. It's like, okay, if I have to write a certain number of tickets, then I'm going to be looking for behavior and probably be overzealous when it comes to this. And so I think it's really important that there's a framework for discussing it. I definitely don't think it's something that should be removed, because as if we've solved it, it's not solved. It's going to be a consistent and pervasive problem because we're very much conditioned to look for those differences. And yet, as we celebrate those differences, what we find is how similar we are. And that honestly, having diverse ideas, and I'm sort of a biologist by training, and I ended up teaching English forever, but I really do believe like all of this is part of God's design, that diversity is important in nature. Those ideas strengthen not just those kids, but they strengthen us. So I'd love to hear some other thoughts on it.
Anyone else? Ebony, open your mic.
I would just ditto her sentiments. I mean, she said it all and put a bow on it. I completely concur. It's so important and so paramount, especially in these times across the nation that that we're doing such training. And I definitely agree that it should be national. There may be some specific things to an individual organization, but as a nation, we have a responsibility with regards to this body of work.
Yes. And one of the reasons for that is like, again, everybody wants to sort of group and say, okay, well, yeah, so these teachers, we definitely got to get them some training. But we don't really consider like, okay, well, how are these decisions that are made at a political level, how really reflective are they of an understanding and knowledge of the needs of the students they serve? I think a lot of times, again, well-intentioned, we want to do something, right? And so we feel like, let's do something that seems like an obvious answer. But yeah, these conversations, especially at the federal level, because that's where so many decisions are made and handed down, they have consequences. And and those usually negatively affect teachers. And then that can often negatively affect students because of it. So.
Thank you. What a great discussion. Again, I appreciate you all. We're going to go to our next session, and I am excited to introduce my colleagues for this session. Dr. Shelley Rouser has been an educator for more than 20 years, and I get the opportunity to see her innovation in action every single day. She oversees the Council for Professional Education at DSU, which is comprised of 8 undergraduate education programs and 3 of our graduate programs. Prior to joining DSU, Dr. Rouser worked in the K-12 educational environment as a teacher and instructional coach for the first half of her career, and as an administrator in the school district and at the state level the second half. Her current work at Delaware State University is grounded in establishing a more equitable system and diverse educators in the K-12 schools through initiatives aimed at increasing the number of male educators, establishing innovative undergraduate and graduate programs that prepare culturally responsive teachers and administrators, ensuring early childhood education programs for undersourced resource communities meet high quality standards. My next colleague, Dr. Timmons, who's co-presenting with her, is an associate professor at Delaware State University and the director of the Office of Clinical and Field Experiences. And I can tell you, our students rave about their experiences. And between Dr. Rouser and Dr. Timmons, they are truly prepared to go into our school systems, whether they stay in Delaware, which we like them to do, or whether they go across the country, go back home. And the work that the two of them do is so appreciated by me and the colleagues in their department. She began her career as a classroom teacher and transitioned to high school to higher ed with the goal of transforming the clinical experience in the pre-service teacher space. Dr. Timmons is committed to public service and is actively involved in multiple organizations focused on enhancing the professional practice of future educators. Please welcome Dr. Shelley Rouser and Dr. Crystal Timmons with Power Session 3, Refresh for Work-Life Balance.
All right, good morning again. I am Crystal Timmons, and I'm so excited to be a part of this panel today. I have already have so many takeaways from this morning and looking forward to many more as we continue our experience. I look forward to sharing with you some important tips and tools to strengthen your emotional, physical, and mental well-being that have been referenced already by our other wonderful presenters. I am honored to be presenting this morning with my friend and colleague, Dr. Shelley Rouser.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Shelley Rouser. And I am so excited about this session. I'm excited about the sessions I've had a chance to participate in, excited to work. Crystal, we had so much fun planning this session. It's going to be fun carrying it out. And I'm really excited for what we're about to delve into. I have had a personal quest for probably about a decade to help women find ways to simplify making changes to just more ways to take care of themselves, in natural ways. And so here's the pay value for staying tuned in with us for the next 20 minutes and what you can expect from the session. FRESH is an acronym for 5 areas of focus. that are key for you to avoid that S on your chest syndrome that Ebony Shield spoke of, as well as to make sure that you nurture and care for yourself. As you're caring for others, that is key. And that was a message from Brandi Davis. And there is a treat embedded at the end of our segment where you will learn and experience how to create a brief, powerful, mindful moment in the middle of your day, whenever you need it, wherever you need it. And goodness knows we need it. So that is a bit about what you can expect. And as we are sharing, you can expect to receive really practical tips and tools. So jot down some notes and think about some ways that you can just make a couple of steps. We're going to talk about habits and how you build them at the end, but don't feel like everything has to happen all at once. But we hope that you'll leave this with some practical tips that you can start using today, and that will start helping you feel like you're giving yourself the care that you deserve. So I'm going to turn things back over to you, Crystal.
All right. Thank you, Shelly. So the F in refresh is finding time for yourself. And as our other presenters have stated, we all know that taking care of yourself is vital in order to be productive in all areas of life. And when I was reflecting on the challenges of finding time for yourself, my mind drifted to 3 of my favorite TV personalities: Florida Evans from Good Times, Louise Jefferson from The Jeffersons, and Claire Huxtable from The Cosby Show. Now, of course, we know they were all very different from their personalities, their ages, income level, working inside or outside the home, and educational level. But one common denominator was that they never had time for themselves. It has been normalized that women are constantly running around taking care of people and problems, which we do a very good job at, by the way. But in finding time for ourselves, we must be intentional. And we must also go a step further to protect the time that we have set aside. First, we have to build time into our schedule and make sure it fits our lifestyle. I talk with friends sometimes that share how they're up at 5 o'clock in the morning, talking to God or their spiritual deity. And I'm thinking to myself, why are you bothering God so early in the morning? He's going to have a long day, and here you are come knocking at 5 o'clock. I've tried to follow someone else's schedule, and it doesn't work for me because I'm just not an early riser. Again, make sure it fits your style. Secondly, we have to protect our time and set boundaries. Initially, when I started working from home, I would take my laptop to bed with me just to finish a few things. Big mistake. I had to establish a rule that work-related material was not allowed in the bedroom. The living room had transformed into my office, and that is where all work had to be completed. There has to be a cutoff point to your workday. And while every day doesn't look the same, we have to be mindful to turn off. Here are a few helpful tools for intentionality and setting boundaries. Use your phone to set reminders, and on the opposite end, use it to silence notifications. I know some of you, like me, are in some annoying groups that start texting before sunlight or after the late night show. Silence them. And remember, the time you have for yourself is for relaxation, meditation, journal writing, reading or listening to audiobooks, setting a calm environment, using a diffuser or essential oils. The R is for nurturing relationships. I am a native Floridian who moved to Delaware about 3.5 years ago. And the first year I was here, I was just trying to figure out where I was and why in the world it was so cold here. The second year, I found a church, decided which chapter of my sorority I was going to join, and then came the pandemic and everything just stopped. Friends and family are an integral part of my life, and it's been difficult to be so far from home without family and an extensive social network that I'm used to. And I know that this is not or is common for a lot of other people as well. But one of the greatest lessons I've learned from this experience is to make a conscious effort to let friends and family know now how much you care about them. I've decided not to wait for special occasions to be the reason to check in with someone or to let them know how important they are to me. Another critical issue in nurturing relationships is dropping the baggage, letting go of the pain and disappointments that have been caused by the people closest to us. Each one of us have a different journey, so our baggage looks different. Some of us can carry our pain in a tiny little change purse, and some of us can carry our pain and disappointment in a very stylish clutch. Some of us have backpacks and even three-piece luggage sets. I can't talk about nurturing relationships without recognizing that some of our relationships have to first be restored. This can be an entire session on its own, as you know. But in your quiet time, I would like for you to ask yourself, who do I need to forgive and who needs to forgive me? The following is a quote from the great Maya Angelou. You can't forgive without loving. And I don't mean sentimentally. I don't mean mush. I mean having enough courage to stand up and say, I forgive, I'm finished with it. Here are a few practical tools you can use to nurture relationships. Utilizing group text messages, the GroupMe app, having scheduled check-ins, even old school phone calls. Small gifts from Amazon that pop up on someone's porch can never hurt. Virtual calls and even virtual book clubs. Advance, please. Exercise and movement are an important part of a balanced life, but we know how easy it is to put it off to the next day, and ultimately that day never comes. At the beginning of the pandemic, I was excited about being able to incorporate exercise into my daily routine, and I was able to use my drive time to and from work for exercising. I hate to admit it, but what I thought was going to be a 2 or 3 month event began to drag by day after day, and I just fell off. It began to make more sense to just go downstairs and get to work rather than take the time to exercise. I immediately began to see the difference, not in just my weight, but stress levels and overall witness. Now, I know you've probably seen all the advertisements for Peloton and other exercise equipment, but I would encourage you to remember that anything is something. Taking a walk, finding a cardio or ab workout online, small steps can lead to big wins. Sometimes exercise routines can become a little redundant or boring, but remember that you are in control of that. I found some awesome dance videos online, and if you want to pretend like you're Beyonce or maybe even Megan Thee Stallion, this is your opportunity. A few helpful tools that can assist with your exercise journey are setting realistic goals, downloading apps on your phone such as step counters, keeping weights or other equipment in various parts of the house. Personally, I had to get rid of the excuse that the equipment was downstairs, but I was upstairs. An accountability partner can also be very motivating, someone to check on you to make sure you're on track. Remember to take short breaks throughout the day to get up and move. To power up, we challenge you to have a 3-2-1 personal power hour every day. 30 minutes for yourself, 20 minutes for movement, and 10 minutes to nurture a relationship. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Rauser now, and she will continue our steps to refresh.
Thank you so much. That was fantastic. All right, let's talk about the S. Let's talk about sleep, but let's also talk about rest. 1 in 3 Americans have trouble falling asleep or staying asleep. So the first question to ask yourself is, what is your sleep hygiene? Getting your Z's affects everything from our productivity to our relationships. It even affects those workouts that Crystal was just talking about. And just to drive the point home, here's what might happen if we don't get the expert recommended 7 to 8 hours sleep per night. Every cellular process in our body goes completely haywire. Our digestive, endocrine, immune systems suffer. Our nervous system can't process information. We're at much risk of higher disease, and we can suffer even from mood disorders. All of this comes together when we have a proper sleep hygiene. So think about your own sleep hygiene. So what can you do when sleep feels like a distant dream? Here's a few tips. Make sure that you're keeping consistent sleep schedules. We all have different schedules, and so you want to set one that works for you. But an example that works for me is rising with the sun. And so I'm up between 6 to 7 a.m. And I make sure that I'm finishing all of my eating for the day before 7 p.m. Also, winding down and unplugging by 9 o'clock at night is part of my routine, because that gives me the time that I need to start that unwind period from 9 to 10, and I'm asleep and in bed by 10 o'clock. I'm in bed by 10 o'clock. I try to get sleep by 10. And so what do you do with that hour, you might ask? Like, what are you doing from 9 to 10 if you're not plugging around on your devices? During that hour, that's that me time. If you can build in time to give yourself a facial, take a warm shower, bring those essential oils. I'll give you a tip on that. Take a bath, read a book, do some journaling, but try to get away from screen if you can during that time. And if you can't, unplug completely from screen for that entire hour. Try just 30 minutes to start. Try to make sure that at least the 30 minutes before you tuck in for bed are screenless. It'll make a huge difference. A couple other things that come to mind: declutter your bedroom. Prep your sleep space. I keep a nice little essential oil spray right on my nightstand, and I spray the pillowcase with some nice lavenders and everything. And I'll talk more about essential oils in a little bit. But prep that sleep space, whatever brings you comfort. Have some nice dim light in there, even during that hour, so your body is beginning to make the transition from the bright light of the day to the evening dark. And keep a dark room too when you're going to sleep, and not a lot of light around you. Don't trick your body as to what time it is. So that's a few things that are part of my sleep routine. And think about your own sleep hygiene and some tips that you might be able to take over into yours. And make time for mindfulness, a meditation, gratitude, prayer on a daily basis, even if it's only 5 minutes. But be consistent, if nothing else, about bedtime and morning routines. And bedtime and morning routines are connected. As humans, we are creatures of habit. We thrive on schedule. Our whole bodies are built around a common schedule, and we need to make sure that our bodies know what to expect. They function more optimally when we do. If we switch things up, like sleep and diet and exercise frequently, our bodies stay on alert and trying to preserve energy. So if we switch things up a lot, we kind of put our bodies on this thing of what's about to happen here. And so we want to make sure that we create that consistent schedule. Consider putting your phone in another room even, but certainly put them on silent if you're like where you're expecting, someone that you want to have reach you. You can even set the features on your phone so that certain people can bypass the moon feature if there's a elderly parent or something like that. But by and large, turn that thing off, use that moon feature and shut down notifications. For me, that's 9 o'clock at night. And in the morning, set an intention for the day. Meditation. That's the rest part of it. It's not all about sleep. It's also about providing those many doses of rest throughout the day. Give yourself a couple of times during the day where you just take 5 minutes for a pause. And if you think you're too busy to meditate, then you're the exact person who needs to do it more than anyone. So here's some tools. Insight Timer. I just discovered it about 4 months ago. Another free app that you can use that has just thousands of meditations that are right there waiting for you. It's my daily go-to. There's also other apps like Calm and Headspace that many of you might already be using or curious about. If you're one of those people that goes to bed and your mind's racing and you can't get things out of your mind, a reminder about the tactic, if you've never heard it, to keep a notepad on your nightstand. If nothing else, it gives you a place. I don't know about you, but sometimes I'm just like, I think about this, and this, and then you don't want to forget it. So you just keep telling yourself, don't forget it. Put a notepad on your nightstand, and that way you can just roll over, jot it down, and drift right back to sleep knowing it'll be there waiting for you. White noise, essential oils on your pillow. Oils like lavender, chamomile, sandalwood, sage, all promote relaxation and alleviate anxiety and will contribute to a better sleep. Next slide, please. The H is for healthy eating. Let's face it, this Zoom world is filled with all kinds of temptations around us, as many of us might be working from home. And this Zoom here is filled with many busy women. And you don't have to make a choice between your busy life and junk stuff and having healthy eating habits. If you're going to have the energy you need to care for other people and care for yourself, your food must be your fuel. So does your food leave you feeling good and energized? Or does it leave you feeling lethargic, bloated, tired? Really important to keep healthy food around us. Right here, this is my workspace. I keep nuts over here during the week. I don't have them here today, nuts and cranberries. I keep a cereal bar here right beside me all the time. I even place my vitamins beside me so that in the morning I won't forget to take them. Make sure that you keep the things that you know are going to be your fuel around you, close by, particularly when you're working from home, but even when we are back in office spaces, if we are in a temporary, different kind of situation now. Meal prep is also key to success, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I like to do that on a Sunday and just load up the things that I'm going to be eating for lunch for the week, because lunch is the part where I just go haywire if I don't have something ready for me. I just grab whatever's around. And believe it or not, eating before 7 p.m. is optimum for digestion. And also eating a little bit lighter at dinner is better for your sleep. Your lunch should actually be your heaviest meal of the day, believe it or not, because you're giving yourself time for your body to burn that heavier meal. Along with keeping your body fueled with healthy foods, also be sure that you're taking a quality supplement so that you're getting your daily intake that you need of your nutrients. You'll feel a difference with that too. And I want to make sure that you understand the importance of fiber in your diet. It regulates our blood glucose. It regulates cholesterol levels. It's a detoxer. It promotes regularity. It's just giving you all the energy you need, and it's getting rid of the bad stuff. Think of it as like triggering that trash compactor for your body. Some tools for you. I've started actually using these little packets from a company that originated in Canada and starting to make its way to the US, called Epicure. They have these little packets that can lead to a nice 30-minute meal. Healthy, good for you, and not a time stealer when you have a lot of busyness going on. You can also prep and freeze your food so that it's ready for you just to take out and pop in the oven. We like to do that with fish, and we stock up at the beginning or the end of the season before things are gone. And we just season it up and freeze it, put it in the oven, and then you have healthy food for you all winter long. And you can do that all year long, really. So those are a few tips on nutrition. And now we're going to find time for a word, if you'll, yes, thank you. We're going to have a little bit on this mindful moment. So now comes our special treat. We hope you find it special. We're excited to embed this in our session. We're going to take you through an easy to replicate 3-minute mindful moment. And for this next piece, I would ask that everybody make sure that you're on mute, that you remain on mute. And I would also say that you have permission at this time to turn off your camera. That way you feel completely comfortable and ready to relax, and we're not all staring at you meditate. And so for the next 60 seconds, before we get into our mindful moment, I'm going to ask you to make a list of all the things you love. Make a list of all the things you love. Make it in your head, make it in the chat, make it on a notepad beside you. So take a look at your list. How many of you had you on your list? And I'm curious, if you had you on the list, how far down on that list were you? Have you been playing the strong one? Are you the one who backbends, overextends, and pretends everything is all right for everyone else? Are you tired? Overpouring your cup? I know you must be. So maybe it's time to rethink what it means to be the strong one. Lay down your armor, remove that cape, and let's think of strong in a new way. You will be strong for yourself, your family, your loved ones, and your work when you take care of you. So today's meditation is about giving you a short mindful moment that you can use any time of the day, in the morning, or as a transition between work meetings and tasks, or as a late afternoon reset to decompress before your me time and family time in the evening. So find a comfortable seat, place your feet firmly on the ground, place your hands on your thighs and palms facing toward the sky to receive. Release any tensions and preoccupations. Unclench that jaw. Relax your shoulder with a soft shoulder roll and let your arms fall away from your ears. Find a way for your body to be at ease. Soften the gaze in your eyes. Soften the gaze in your eyes, closing your eyes if you are comfortable. All of you is safe here. As the eyes close, let your eyelids become heavy and become more aware of your body, your breath. Just notice your body. Without judgment, get a sense of how you're feeling today. What tension do you feel? What are you holding on to? Where is the tension? Let's send the breath there. Deep, yummy breaths. Your breath is your medicine. And everyone take a deep breath in and hold it 3 seconds at the top of the inhale. And exhale through the mouth. Let it all go. And we'll do that 3 more. Deep breath in, hold 3 seconds, and exhale through the mouth. Deep breath in. And exhale through the mouth as you let it go. Every breath in welcomes nourishment and stillness, and the exhale releases anyone and anything that no longer serves us. Now return your breath to a natural rhythm and dive into the sacred sanctuary of silence. Let yourself rest and relax. Take refuge in your inner sanctuary and surrender to the inner sanctuary of your own heart. And as you relax your body and bring attention to your breath, you will naturally focus on the present time. Become aware of your body's comfort level and make any adjustments needed so that you can be fully here now. Imagine you see a bubble of translucent white golden light in front of you, about a foot taller and wider than you. See this bubble of light gently floating on the earth before you, vibrating and glowing from its center outward toward you. You may feel warmth as you envision it. Now take a step forward, reach out your hand and touch the sphere of light and notice how it vibrates back to you, easily and openly inviting contact. Take another step forward and see yourself step inside the sphere of light and see the energy move out and open to accommodate you, and then gently seal itself behind you, enveloping you like a warm blanket. Notice how the cares of the world fall away. Here you are safe, here you are well, here you are wholly you. There is only this moment, which is safe, beautiful, and open to you. And release your concerns about yesterday or tomorrow and let your body soften and relax. All that matters is right here and right now. All is unfolding in perfect time and perfect order. You only need to be and allow. Continue to watch your breath. If your mind wants to wander, let breath be your anchor. Grab that thought, cup it in your hands, and release it. Just let it know, thank you, not now, and watch it flutter away. The goal here is not to empty your mind, but to refocus on the breath. When you're ready, you can choose to emerge and return to your waking state of conscious awareness and take with you the peace that was gifted to you, I hope, here, and find ways to mirror it in your daily life. Embody the peace you now know exists and is always present, just waiting for you to acknowledge it and let it find you. And when it feels right, you can open your eyes, getting ready to be you mindfully. Okay, thank you. We're back. Take a moment to notice how you feel. I hope that you're feeling more settled. Was that hard or was it easy? Be careful about judging experiences when you are trying to give yourself a mindful moment, like judging if you had distractions. Each time will be different, and like anything else, it's going to get better with practice. We have time for questions, maybe. I'm not sure. Dr. Edwards? And so the other thing that we leave you with is having some kind of tracker that you can use just to begin the list right here on those lines, the things that you want to start practicing with your daily care. And then if you go around, you can actually start to check off just day by day how you're making little habits become part of your daily practice. And we hope that you learned something and this was helpful, and keep taking care of you. Thank you so much.
All right. Our next presenter is my colleague, mentor, and friend, who is a true motivator. Dr. Kantana Hall is a passionate educator who inspires her students to use their critical thinking skills and communication skills to maneuver through their academic, personal, and professional lives. From a philosophical standpoint, Dr. Hall strives to consistently actualize the demonstrable elements of faculty excellence, and I can say that she does that every day. To employ the college principles and to promote and defend the American Association of University Professors standards on academic freedom. Her passion for dramatic writing and the performing arts is no less intense. Dr. Hall believes the potential for transformative creative vision will languish devoid of an ethical sense of responsibility to the art form itself, the participants, and the collaborative process that we call the performing arts. Please welcome my colleague, mentor, and friend, Dr. Katana Hall, who will facilitate Power Session 4, Teaching Virtually with a Spirit of Positivity and Optimism. Dr. Hall.
Dr. Hall, you can share your screen.
Thank you so very much. I'm going to say, as I go through this transition, I really want to say good morning. Happy Saturday. It's so important that we take good care of ourselves, and it is equally important that we take care of each other. Now, I'm going to start, but I'm going to say this. I think that this Power Up, Impacting and Influencing Women in Education virtual conference is absolutely amazing. I am honored to just be in the same space with these amazing women educators, and their passion and commitment to academic excellence and continuous learning is obvious through the presentations we've heard so far. I'd like to thank you, Dr. Edwards, Dr. Rausser, and Professor Brown for your vision. I think sometimes we don't thank one another or compliment one another quite as often as we should. And so I'd like to do that at this moment. I also just want to reflect on some of the things that we've heard so far. As we cultivate our flavor while staying grounded in our why, we lead with power to sustain and advance culturally responsive pedagogy, which creates responsive classrooms that honor our students and ourselves. Honoring ourselves requires that we intentionally refresh to acquire a genuine work-life balance. And the seed I'm sowing and watering is really about empowering us to create, develop, assess what we're doing so that we can celebrate what's working and release what's not working effectively. Let's begin the journey, shall we? Teaching virtually with a spirit of positivity and optimism requires a few things. But I want to let you know that by the end of this presentation, it is my sincere hope that you'll be able to identify 7 techniques for fostering your own positivity and optimism as an educator. You'll be able to incorporate a variety of creative active learning strategies that improve positivity and optimism in the virtual classroom. And lastly, that you'll be able to select assessment instruments that work more effectively, especially since we are in the coronavirus SARS-2 pandemic, and we've moved to this remote learning environment, which brings with it, in and of itself, some tension and some stress for ourselves and our students. As educators, we bring the sum total of who we are to the table. We bring our spirit, which means that we bring our enthusiasm, our vitality, our energy, our character, our grit, our heart, our warmth, our courage. But all too often, we don't take a moment during the course of the day to celebrate that spirit or feed that spirit or tend to that spirit. So we learned in the refresh session that we really need to take time so that we are celebrating who we are and we allow ourselves moments throughout the course of the day to pause, to breathe. Additionally, to cultivate positivity and optimism, we need to understand that positivity will set the tone for the virtual learning environment. So we bring that with us. We set the stage for whether positivity has the room or ground to grow. When we are thinking positively, we see that manifested in our students. They are encouraged and motivated. They seem more determined and imaginative and optimistic as well. Positivity, it's been said, our positivity, rather, as educators, allows our students to draw power from us, from what they see. We serve as role models. So it is always in our best interest to make that classroom a microcosm of the world we would like to see, filled with that kind of optimism and hopefulness. When there's positivity, the seed for optimism can grow and flourish in a healthy environment where we see openness and humor and authenticity and courage and compassion, not just coming from the educator to the student, but you can see that reaction and transactional relationship beginning between classmates. And that's really what we want to foster as educators. We model behavior that we hope our students will aspire to. Optimism encourages a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. As opposed to our students saying, I can't, they might say instead, this is really hard, but you know what, Doc? You think I can do it. You said I'm going to be able to do this, so I'm going to keep working on it so I can do it. Sometimes we are the only good morning, good job, hey, you're doing a great job in improving, that our students will hear. I've presented or gathered about 7 techniques that you see now, and I'll talk about each one of them individually rather quickly. So these are techniques that I am saying as educators we have to engage in so that we can set the atmosphere for positivity and optimism in the virtual learning classroom. The first is release tech-itis. Keep calm and restart your PC. We are working with Zoom, learning management systems, Canvas, Blackboard, Teams, you name it. Technology goes down, the internet doesn't connect, students get kicked out of Zoom, you're in the middle of lecturing, you're kicked out of Zoom. Do not stress. Can you do anything about it? Nope. You can't control that. The only thing you can do is have some backup plans. I've learned to de-stress my students and myself related to this technology issue by having about an A through D plan. So my students know at least 3 backup plans for when technology fails. You might want to think about that. If you're meeting on Zoom and then you have the learning management system, Canvas, for example, you might want to say our first backup plan is going to be to regroup on Canvas conferences. They can call in and they don't have to worry about turning on cameras, and the vice versa as well. I've been on Canvas before teaching or trying to log on when it's told me there are too many people using it, so you can't use it. Don't stress. Have a backup plan. Communicate that backup plan to your students. They will be so appreciative for that foreknowledge, and then just restart. Go out of Zoom and come in again. The second is to project joy. When you wake up in the morning, we get to choose what kind of day we want to have. Even if it was very trying the night before, the day before, we get to choose. I always choose joy. I provide myself with opportunities in the morning. I'm an early bird, so I am up at 5 talking to God. And it's okay. Not everybody needs to do that. But what you need to do is find what it is, what routine you need to start your day off in a very peaceful, optimistic, and positive manner. Creative activities are really important. I teach theater, but I also teach Speech 101, Introduction to Film, English composition, and English literature. So I'm always looking for ways to stimulate my students to thinking outside of that box. I want them to know it's okay. That's our job as educators, to grow them so that they can be empowered and that they are very confident in the knowledge they've acquired. I create activities. These are just some of them. I dedicate days to Tuesdays and Thursdays, like tongue twisters days for my acting class. I also use that in my speech class. But quite frankly, you could use it in any class, especially if you needed something to communicate a concept on linguistics or rhetoric or articulation, pronunciation, enunciation. Scavenger hunts are really cool things for all ages. Remember that, well, at Baltimore City Community College, I might have 14-year-olds in my class, dually enrolled, and I might have 70-year-olds in my class. And so I've got to think of activities and opportunities for them to move as well. Use the reactions and icons on the Zoom, the Canvas, and Teams link. Use the yes and no polls. In Canvas, that's a really cool feature to use because they give you the results and you can share that with the students without sharing who voted what. Additionally, use breakout rooms and the whiteboards. I use the whiteboards to let students just tell me how they feel. How are you feeling today? And I'll create a whiteboard, and we can do in a poll too, poll everywhere, and polls like that allow you to create word art, word mapping. Think, pair, share sessions can be effectively managed in those breakout rooms that you'll find both on Zoom as well as on Canvas or learning management system. I encourage students to write letters. I try to create assignments that allow them to vent and express how they're feeling at this time. Generally, I always manage it so that they can share advice or encouragement to their younger selves, to their current selves from the perspective of being older, 40, 50, 60. What would you tell your 18-year-old self if you're 60 years old? What would you say to you right now? And students are always far more kinder and tender and supportive of themselves when they write those letters. It also allows them to be more supportive and kinder to themselves in the present, in real time. We do that so we can teach with the spirit of positivity and optimism. Poems, the incorporation of poems like poems and lyrics, limericks, and haiku work as well. I have this I am poem, 10 lines. First letter of each word has to start with the first letter of their first name. At least 4 words per line. You may not use prepositions or conjunctions, can only repeat your name once. They're going like, whoa. But I give them a model. I do mine and share that with them. And they come back so excited. So I get to see right away the students who don't think they're good writers, who are really good writers in this avenue. It's just that when they think about writing a research paper or an essay, they sort of stall and think they don't have the skill sets to do that. So I allow them to work up to that, writing letters and poetry. Incorporating music. We've heard music several times today incorporated into the conference. Why? Because it does affect mood and emotion. One of the ones I use a lot is Desiree, if you all remember that. You got to be strong. You got to be smart. You got to be wiser. So not a singer, but those kind of lyrics are encouraging. And then the students are excited to see me at the beginning of class. I give them a 5-minute grace period at the beginning of class, kind of bouncing around to music. Images and quotes as writing prompts or just things to think about at the beginning of a session or in the middle when you need a break, or even at the end, food for thought that you want them to take away. Other things that you can incorporate would be the use of the word of the day. I have it downloaded to my phone, and I encourage my students to do so that they can grow their vocabulary. In Baltimore City, they stopped teaching grammar and syntax about the 3rd or 4th grade, which is really disheartening for me. It actually really ticks me off, to be quite honest. Then how can my students be expected to write if you stop teaching them the fundamentals and rudimentary elements so that they can be smart and articulate and competitive? So any way that I can think of undergirding skill sets that are challenging to my students, I include in supplemental instruction. The 1-minute paper, literally 1 minute. You can teach on a particular subject matter, and after that, just do a little quick 1-minute paper. What did you get? And so you'll be able to look at that and see what students are retaining. Reflective essays using the DEEP model is It's a model that contains 4 paragraphs. The first paragraph describes an event that occurred to the writer. The second paragraph allows or requires the writer to interpret that event, talk about how that event made them feel. The third paragraph is about evaluating that event. And the fourth paragraph is about taking the sum total of that experience and thinking about reflectively, thinking about futuristically rather, what you're going to do differently in the future. That's a really good essay or assignment. Reading aloud. You'd be surprised that students, no matter what their age, enjoy being read to. So hone up on your oral interpretation, your reading aloud skills. Read a little passage that might be a little cumbersome for them to read in that text, or especially if it's a philosophical or theoretical argument that's being made. Read it aloud to them a couple of times and then discuss it. And 14 and 15 are interrelated. Watch short videos. One of the videos my students enjoyed more than anything was the perceptions video. Many of you may have already seen it. It's on YouTube. I think it was produced in the UK. The second one certainly was. My two favorite. They're playing basketball, and there's a person in a bear suit that walks through the group playing basketball. Well, 8 out of 10 students didn't see the bear walking through. And so it allows you to talk about what you see versus what you think you see, what's real, what's not real, how the brain works, how dendrites and synapses spark. So the other is hiding in plain sight, and it's really about they photographed a scene, they cut, and then they changed where the objects were located in the scene. And you can spend some time with that, because that's engaging and students will end up laughing and talking about that. And the other is to think about ways that you can encourage students to use the technology that they're using every day more creatively. 15, 30, or 60-second commercials work very well when you are trying to get students, especially if they're working in individual short sessions, to give you a summary of what they've learned and what it means to them and how they're going to use it. And the other is to use mantras. So for yourself, Katana, you are going to soar. Today, you're going to soar. If it were for my students, it would be scholars. Today, you are going to soar. I include those regularly. Number 4, breathe, move, and breathe. Our colleagues have already talked about how you have to move and deep breathing exercises. Well, I'm going to talk about this notion. Linda Stone, former exec for Apple, the Apple Corporation, coined the phrase email apnea. It refers to the fact that we hold our breath on inhalations on a regular basis when we're sitting in front of the computer. So it's called, once again, email apnea. We do hold our breaths. We generally don't hold on exhalation, but we do hold on inhalation. Additionally, sitting in front of a computer for all day and a portion of the night is unhealthy on so many levels. It creates stress, it creates physiological tension, and it also impedes sitting for long periods of time adversely affect our posture, and it also adversely affects circulation. Hence, a lot of collapsed or broken blood vessels and veins in the legs, and things like that. And then the last thing would be, remember that you have to breathe. Sometimes we don't think it is something we would forget, but actually the monotony of sitting in front of the computer, particularly during this transition to remote virtual learning, will cause all of those kind of bad habits to occur if you're not mindful and if you don't actively fight against those. 3 out of 7 people the results of a study conducted by Dr. Liesl Varnek said that 3 out of 7 people hold their breath over the course of a day, several times a day while they're working. Making sure that we breathe, move, and breathe will contribute to the spirit of positivity and optimism. 5, engage authentically. Engage authentically with yourself, and engage authentically with your students. It's okay to say, I'm tired. I don't want to do this anymore. I love the notion, take the S off. We are not superwomen. It's all right to say, I'm tired. I've had enough. And our students would rather us be who we are than pretend to be superhuman, because then they think that's the bar they have to meet. And that's just impossible. It's unrealistic. Plan time for fun. Whatever you do, you must plan time for fun. These are the things that we need to do for ourselves. We need to be creative. We need to breathe, move, and breathe. We need to be authentic. We need to have fun. And 7, know when to walk away. I'm in theater, so it's dramatic enough, but it proves my point. And I actually debated about whether or not I would use this image today for the conference, and I decided that I certainly would. Why? Because I had a physiological hit the wall, crash and burn session about a week ago. Seriously, it was Wednesday, and I had already completed 32 hours. It's a 40-hour week. It was Wednesday, and I've been online specifically related to teaching and teaching-related activities for 32 hours. I was not healthy at the end of that week. I literally became physiologically ill. So I'm saying this from first-hand knowledge. Know when to walk away. We cannot be on 24/7. We have to tend to our health, our well-being, to those we love, who share the space we live in with. Family, they want your attention when it's family time. Those 7 techniques will help you teach virtually more effectively with the spirit of positivity and optimism. Assessment always matters for us. I don't have to explain the 3 levels or 3 periods for assessment: formative, interim, and summative assessment. What I've learned firsthand, however, is that during this remote learning, specifically during the pandemic, that formative versus summative assessment measures seem to get students more engaged and seem to leave them more uplifted. I think one of the obvious reasons is that it's the audience for the data involves students, teachers, and parents. That I was surprised a bit, just a little, because between the fall and spring semester, the response rate or improvement rate for students being more optimistic about moving to remote learning improved by 25% from the fall to the spring, when I started to incorporate more formative assessment opportunities and instruments. Some of the things that you can use for formative assessment in terms of qualitative research gathering would be verbal and nonverbal cues, student self-assessments, those group presentations, workshopping some pre-writing or components, including video, audio, and text-based PowerPoint slides, and those elements. Those things help us to teach positive with a more positive and optimistic spirit. As I begin to wrap it up, I will say this. Teaching virtually with a spirit of positivity and optimism requires practice, and it requires that we practice the pause. When in doubt, pause. When angry, pause. When tired, pause. When stressed, pause. And when you pause, pray, meditate, reflect. It's been my pleasure to present those 7 techniques, 16 creative activities, and to review some assessment modalities that might be more effective in virtual in this remote learning environment for the classroom. And we're excited. And the last thing I want you to do when you're so exhausted and nothing else works, remember why you started teaching. It is one of the jewels in our crowns as women educators. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hall. I have so many notes and practical activities that I will be incorporating when we return from spring break. Thank you so much. Do we have any questions for Dr. Hall in the chat, or anyone want to raise their hand and ask Dr. Hall any questions?
I had a question again for the group. The last section you talked about was the assessments. I know, and Dr. Rouser, I don't know if you've gotten a lot of complaints, but the first semester of the pandemic, there was a lot of grace when it came to assessments. And then the second semester, we dealt with the challenge of, should we be doing the lockdown browsers? Should we monitor? Should we be really focused on these summative assessments? And then, and I'm looking at it through the lens of an educator, like, well, we got to start getting back to some of the things that we were doing to assess students and their skill set. But then I just kind of like turned real quick when I got an email from my kid's school talking about how we had to set up all these different devices to monitor our child as she was taking the 9th grade summative for math. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. What about the children who live in households where they don't have multiple iPads? So, because we had to set up 2 iPads, one to watch her eyes and another that was on the room. And then she's on her MacBook taking the assessment. So I say all that to say, I forget who said it in their presentation. I think Kenda talked about never going back to how it used to be. How do we come up with some new assessment rubrics so that there is a balance between that formative and what the politicians and those, stakeholders in terms of those school boards and college boards and all that kind of thing? How do we come up with some leverage in terms of how we really assess students and their ability to apply what they're learning as they move on to college or as they move from college to the real world space? So that's for anybody.
Well, I'll say that I teach the assessment course, and I like to, so thank you, Dr. Hall, for all that information, very helpful, and I really appreciate, and we'll follow up with you on that a couple of the slides on assessment. But I agree with you, Dr. Edwards. There's a lot of things, just like with life in general, that we've learned during this pandemic that I think, we could say when we go back to quote unquote normal, but some things I think have taught us in the case of assessment that we don't need to go back to normal. And so I talk to students about assessment practices and the fact that, the purpose of our courses is to assess whether students have learned. And there's a fine line between our strict regiments around assessment and making sure that we actually are giving students if we say that people learn at different time clocks, and if we say that, I froze, I think, but if we say that people, it always freezes in the weirdest faces. But if you, are saying that students learn on different time clocks, then what does that mean in terms of giving your systems that you have in your class? So I like to give my students grace period pre-COVID and still now, and I'd like to teach them how to do that in their class. Because ultimately you want to make sure you're assessing whether or not they get it. And if they don't get it at the very moment that you think it's time up, to give them time to showcase that without being penalized for the rest of the semester.
Anybody else?
And
something that I encourage. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
That's okay. Go ahead. You started.
Something that I encourage is, we do a lot of standards-based grading and standards-based focus, and we emphasize project and problem-based learning. So I encourage teachers to assign projects. I am not an advocate for standards-based, or I'm not an advocate for assessments, especially like we do the Ohio State test. And I look at the authenticity and the high level of student engagement. That is what is most meaningful and most worthwhile for me. And that's what I advocate at the I Promise School for my staff and for our students. So just getting away from the assessments where you have to lock down a browser. We encourage to see we encourage our students to show what they've learned, and from what they show us, that will let us know if we need to reteach a particular standard or if we need to take a different approach. That's what I preach, and that's what I focus on at my building.
And I was just going to add to that, just briefly, as I said before, I actually crunched the numbers from the spring semester to the spring, a year. So it's been a year since we've been on remote learning. And what I really have found, and as I said in my presentation, I really have found that, you know, we need assessment, because Middle States or whatever your accrediting body is going to come in and ask you, how are your students learning based on the student learning outcomes you have established. So we need evidence to support that learning. But I really have found that understanding who you're teaching, if we really talked to our students a lot more, and I always tell that to my vice president, engage the students a bit more, because, you know, students will tell you how they learn. You just engage and they'll tell you how they learn. If you engage and listen to the population you're trying to assess, tell you what measures work best for them. If you've got young folks who want to be, I'll say some of my male students, they want to be rappers. Well, I'm not going to get them to write this 10-page research paper right off the bat. That's not a fair assessment for them. That doesn't assess their intelligence. That doesn't assess their cultural worldview or perspective. So let's talk about the things that they like to do, that they know how to do, and use those as instruments to measure their growth. If we were to use the mechanisms that they are comfortable in and then build upon those skill sets, what we get is a better, a true or more authentic outcome for what our students have actually learned, as opposed to imposing the other thing. I'm going to date myself with my age, and I'm so proud to be 62. I am excited and delighted and share that, because it means that the good Lord has blessed me to experience what it is I have experienced and to live through what it is I have lived through. But the point is, I remember taking the SAT test, and I remember my colleagues not knowing what a bureau or a chiffero was. And I said, who designed this test anyhow? I knew who it was because my mother made me join the We Don't Guess, We Look It Up club at 5. I wanted to spell phenomenal. I didn't know whether it was an F or a PH, because why? My mother was a writer, a poet, a librarian. So words were all around me. But my point is, how unfair is that test for the rest of my peers who knew what a dresser was and knew what a closet was, but didn't know what a bureau or a chiffero was. And so that test would deem them as being less intelligent. You know, no. So they're the kinds of things we still have to fight against. So I get it, Brandi, when you say, yes, because it is biased. We can't talk about it like it's not. It is culturally and racially biased. It is not designed for people of color, let alone African American students, to be successful. So we have to come up with those at work while we still satisfy the compliant agencies.
Have any of you been asked to write standardized tests or be a part of examining standardized tests at all?
I think once, about 7 or 8 years ago. So no, regular basis, no.
Kenda?
I've actually written them, never been asked to really evaluate one. But I did want to add like 2 things. One, I think now is a perfect time, right? When everything feels like it's broken, to figure out how we can rebuild better. And so one of the things I think is really important to ask ourselves is like, what is the purpose of these tests? If we say, okay, well, somebody said that the purpose of the test was we wanted to see what they learned. I think if we dig deeper and we actually like went back to our intentions, most people would say the purpose of the test is to see if the kids are prepared for the future. Those are 2 different questions and 2 different answers. And on one of them, we're largely failing, but you'll see some pockets of success. But if you start to look at the question of whether or not these assessments demonstrate whether our students are prepared for their futures, then we all fail. because that is not the future. Every economist, I'm a part of the World Futurist Society, and every single person who looks at this will tell you that the future of work involves creativity and flexibility, ingenuity, grit, and all of these different things. And those are things that we can't measure this way. And the sad part about it is we can't even begin to move in that direction because we lack those skills. And that is exemplified by this school year. The whole world changed and came to an end. I'm sorry, to a stop, to a pause. And yet we thought that we could and should continue exactly the way that we have done in the past, with very, very minor adjustments. And I think we really need to think about that and look at that and understand what that means for our ability to prepare our kids for their future, not for what we want them to be right now, right? What we need them to do, but what they will need to be. And the second point I'll just mention very quickly is that even with all of this data that we collect, we don't know what to do with it, right? It gets stored and it gets filed. But one of my favorite talks to have these days is really about, it's data therapy technically, because I'm finding in schools and districts, the way that we approach data, the culture that we build around it is breaking and ruining relationships between teachers and students, teachers and their administrators, and administrators and districts. But it's really just about finding the narrative in the numbers. If you look at a set of data and it doesn't clearly point a way forward, it is useless, right? There is no point in continuing to collect it at all. It should tell us what we were supposed to do. And so we look at it both of those ways in terms of the assessments we're giving, not even beginning to approach preparing kids for the future they'll have to live and the jobs that they'll have to work, as well as, okay, we have this data and it doesn't actually tell us what we need to do, then it's ineffective.
And I just quickly wanted to add, we've been having conversations about the mindset of mastery. And so, for some of our educators, it's all about how well did the students do? Did they meet this certain threshold? And they stop there. But the assessments, formative in particular, really should be about how are students faring and how can we act, assess, and adjust our practice to better support them with attaining success. So we've really been talking about mindset and the difference between growth and fixed mindset, particularly as it relates to achievement. And so that's a conversation that we've been currently having in my office. How do we shift the mindset of educators to understand that, okay, we currently have this grading procedure and we are looking at ways to modify. I'm currently on a grading task force in my district, but ways to modify how we currently grade and measure student success. So that formative piece, which is currently in our realm of influence, how are we utilizing our skill sets and talents to make sure we are doing what's best for children? So just wanted to add that piece as well.
And I want to add that so many amazing points have been made in the session. And while Dr. Hall was presenting and then Brandi chimed in and talked about project-based learning, I was reflecting on a meeting that I had just yesterday. I'm teaching in a dual enrollment program. One of my teaching responsibilities is teaching in a dual enrollment program. And I work with the liaison from the high school, and we're totally stunned that the students are really not engaged, but these are high school seniors. They're overwhelmed. They're sad that they're not graduating. They're sad that they're not going to prom. And they've kind of been encouraged to participate in this dual enrollment program, but they're overwhelmed. And so we were collaborating on, well, how can we close the gap? So basically, Professor Brown, can you make some exceptions to your late work policy? So I was stunned when I was in this meeting and the liaison said to me, well, can't they just make up the quizzes? And I was just blown away by how limited and how narrow that question is, because as Dr. Hall said, what about the other skills? What about that these students need to know how to write? They need to know how to speak. So you're asking me to just focus in on one type of assessment. So of course, my answer is no. They cannot just make up a quiz, because like many of my fellow educators shared on this panel, that's not really my focus as an educator to begin with. There's so many ways, creative ways to assess students. And as all of you said in your presentations, we have to be unafraid to push back. And it's scary. And Dr. Hall is constantly helping me to find my voice and speak up and really speak to what I believe in as an educator when it's not always easy. So this conversation and dialogue on assessment is powerful on so many levels, from the smallest level to can they just only make up a quiz, to the policy changes that we need on the national and federal levels. So thank you so much, Dr. Hall. And now we're going to give it back to Crystal.
All right, I can tell from the conversation that everybody is really powered up. Please put an emoji or some explanation points in the chat to let everyone know how much you have enjoyed our presentations today. Our last team of presenters have their eye on the future of education. They began the pandemic doing free presentations to empower teachers as we were forced to pivot to remote learning. Professor Brown is a cross-disciplinary educator with 21 years of teaching experience, holding faculty positions in English and psychology. Additionally, Professor Brown is a speaker, consultant, and author of There's Nothing You Can't Do Free writing journal. Professor Brown earned a bachelor's degree in English from University of Maryland College, a master's degree in education and human development from the George Washington University, and a master's degree in psychology from University of Phoenix. Professor Brown is deeply committed to community service, family, spiritual development, and a proud member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority, Xi Omega Chapter in Washington, D.C. Francine Edwards left a vibrant career television industry in 2001, where she worked as a producer and on-air talent for Black entertainment television. Dr. Edwards is currently serving as the founding dean of the College of Humanities, Education, and Social Sciences. In addition to managing 5 academic departments and a multi-million-dollar college-wide budget and teaching, she has been committed to innovation in teaching, the integration of technology, service learning, and most recently credited with the reorganization of 3 academic departments into one, yielding a 6-figure fiscal savings. Dr. Edwards has over a dozen leadership, organizational development, and scholarly publications, and has presented research for AEJMC, the National Communications Association, the International Organization of Social Science and Behavioral Research, the American Association of University Professors, and the Faculty Resource Network, just to name a few. She currently serves on the board of the International Organization of Social Science and Behavioral Research and Delaware First Media. Please welcome Professor Tanya Brown and Dr. Francine Edwards with our final power session, the Post-Pandemic Educator.
Thank you so much, Dr. Timmons. And again, we salute and commend all of the panelists that have come before us this afternoon. Indeed, we have tough acts to follow. And Dr. Edwards, thank you for this opportunity to share this space with you. But let's get right to it. The post-pandemic educator. The COVID-19 pandemic has education under a great deal of pressure. This crisis has forced school systems and institutions of higher education to swiftly change their status quo, their ways of working environments, dramatically shaping up our communities. At the same time, this situation has also brought to light how rigid our current education systems are, which we have referenced. And we are being confronted with the fact that we have inevitably have to change as consequences of current or maybe even future lockdowns. After reflecting on the challenges faced by teachers and professors, it's time to take stock of what we've actually learned and what we need to do in a post-pandemic environment.
And as life would have it, the battery died on my mouse. There we go. So this is just a brief overview of what we're going to offer today. We're going to talk about what has changed, what's coming next so that we can get our minds wrapped around that. And then what can be gained from looking at the challenges that we faced during the pandemic? And so what has changed? So some things have changed and some things will remain the same. So for example, that work-life balance and that personal life, that line is blurred. I don't know about you, but for me, it's a wake-up call when our youngest son comes in, he'll open the office door and say, "You're still working? You're always working." And that's a reminder for me to get up and leave this space because I have to try to make some things in my home life normal. But there are some pandemic-specific things that will drive the post-pandemic era. And the first thing is that the process of learning is as important as what is being learned. And I think some of what we're going to share is going to be just an echoing or an affirmation of what a lot of you have shared today. So before the pandemic, educators across the country taught students how to read, how to code, how to determine math concepts, how to think critically and creatively, etc. This expectation of students was to digest information while also learning to be, resourceful and independent and ask questions, collaborate with their peers in the classroom. These are things that we've always valued in our school systems or institutions of higher education. But over the past year, we've watched these skills become more than beneficial. They are indeed required for students to master and to be successful in the virtual environment where there is limited airtime. More sequential communication and technology hurdles can inhibit the learning of our students. And I would go as far to say as they inhibit the teacher or professor's ability to deliver sometimes. Students in these environments often have to offer their own critical yet productive feedback to an authority figure, which is us, the educators. And I think this goes hand in hand with our discussion of, I think Ebony said it, asking these students, bringing those students into the space, and Dr. Hall said it, bringing them in to talk about their feelings about assessment, because they're the ones who are getting assessed. A skill that is essential in learning and in the workplace. And as educators, we are committed to building on this dynamic in our virtual classrooms and continuing to focus on the resourcefulness, self-advocacy, and collaboration post-pandemic. The challenge is that some will continue to struggle with the adaptation of technology, but like we said, these skills are essential as we prepare our students for the workforce and advanced education. The second one is focusing on engaging content, not seat time. So if the pandemic has taught us anything, we don't utilize screen time the same way in our academic lives that we do in our personal lives. I think this is a huge misconception. We're thinking as we pivot that these kids are already tied to this. They're tethered to these things. So it's going to be okay for them to be tethered some more in an academic space. And that's not true. Everyone has that misconception about digital natives. They grew up with technology, but they don't use it the same way. And they don't have the same appreciation for that technology in the classroom space. And so that being said, the loss in instruction time as a result of adjusting to how we consume that technology has forced us to really look at how we can change programs or improve programs so that we continue to engage students and ignite their curiosity. However, this challenge also offers all of us an opportunity or an invitation to really double down and focus on the quality of content being offered with such limited seat and screen time. And this allows us to offer more streamlined curriculum, a curriculum that has been created, albeit out of necessity. But what we can learn from this is that engagement and outcomes speak volumes to how we can prepare students in the future. We all know that there's no going back to education like it used to be. And that's pretty much why that we have to look at engagement as a key factor in moving forward. The third one is protecting the social space provided by schools as we transform education. Again, someone touched on this about schools being a safe place for our students to be. The school is a physical space and it's indispensable. And traditional classrooms and campus space have always been a safe space, but now we have to really look at a variety of ways of actually doing school. So for example, a space where we educate during the week can be a place where we offer meals and provide evening time or time for people to gather on the weekends. A space that transforms into learning zones after hours. And in higher education, these spaces are collective living spaces and different from the spaces that our students leave their dorms to go and learn. So those spaces need to be protected and preserved. And so the pandemic has really highlighted food and housing insecurities, cultural barriers, that prior to COVID-19 seemed to just be swept under the rug or kind of like isolated or kept secret. And the reality for many students is that things won't ever be normal for them. And what used to be comfortable and safe, whether it's a campus, whether it's a community center, whether it's an after-school program, is not going to be the same for them. But we have to try to get back to some of those things because we want to make our school districts, our campuses safer as we move forward. And the fourth one is free and open source technologies being made more readily available to teachers and students. And one thing that I know DSU was trying to do long before the pandemic was really empower our faculty and staff to create content, to create open source materials that not only are used by Delaware State University, but that are uploaded to these sharing sites so that other people can take advantage and be benefited by those sources as well. And we have to continue to support faculty in this way, whether it's allowing students at the faculty at the K-12 level to have release time or another planning period to be able to create content, the same thing for higher ed. This has to be incorporated into how we create that professional development space. Education can't thrive with ready-made content that's built outside of the pedagogical space. So there's a lot of content out there that is built by corporations. As a matter of fact, in doing this research, I want to say it was IBM or another tech company found that when they were hiring fresh college grads, they didn't have the skills that they wanted in their new hires. And they decided to create their own curriculum. And guess what they did with that? They sold it to the universities. But what the universities were finding is that that cookie cutter curriculum that was created outside of an academic space wasn't meeting the academic criteria or rigor even. And so there has to be some sort of bridging. Of course, we need that corporate input because we want to make sure we're preparing students. And even in high school where there are more pathway programs, we want to make sure that we're preparing students, but we have to be able to blend that content. And so we can't depend as educators on these digital platforms or these companies to provide the content. We got to start creating it ourselves. And then lastly, build back better. Pre-pandemic, the global movement to correct the inequities that women face was a powerful force. Because those differences were further highlighted by the pandemic, women have been empowered and at a national level to create resources that are designed to make sure that we're pouring into women and a specific COVID-19 recovery plan for women. One such specific plan is in the state of Hawaii. They've really invested a lot of resources to make sure that post-pandemic women, and specifically women in education, have the support they need to go back in and do their jobs. And so we want to set women up for equal opportunities and productive job searches for those women who had to leave their careers and go back, all while safeguarding the mental health and the welfare of our educators and their families. And this is probably one of the most significant changes, but the work is long and hard and we're far from done. And I know that we have committed people. We have a lot on this webinar today.
Dr. Edwards, you're absolutely right. The work is not done, but because of impactful women like each of you, it will get done, and we will continue to change things for the better. The next section is divided into 3 areas. What's coming next focuses on business as usual with important twists, a new normal for longer, and a renewed outlook for educators. Let's take a look. Business as usual with an important twist. Let's be realistic. The pandemic probably won't allow us to engage initially, even when it's over, with business as usual. As a matter of fact, I charge each of you to think about how we can be transformational and inclusive, focus on synergy and constant innovation. This is what education ultimately is about. In some instances, if we're doing business as usual, we may continue to fall short of service to our students, moving forth legislation that makes education better and support each other as educators. The pandemic was an emergency, a crisis that served as a wake-up call for how we do business. Some of the businesses as usual will be complemented by things like strengthening the spirit of the community in school districts and universities and their links with society, those important partnerships that we must continue to nurture and maintain. These links are important because they will keep us from repeating the same mistakes over and over again that we did before the pandemic. Another twist is the fact that a variety of new teaching methods will continue to appear. However, the focus will remain on face-to-face education. The experience gathered through the lockdown will influence the adoption of teaching methods and technological tools. Twist number 3 is flexibility to work remotely. Even when physical interactions are allowed, flexibility will allow increase due to positive experiences to effectiveness and well-being of employees. And lastly, there's this rethinking of community services and support. As the involvement with society has been strengthened, it also highlighted the role of school systems in our colleges and universities. This will be one key aspect that improves the lives of students in our institutions. But we have to note that many of the community organizations and services that were offered were made possible by special COVID-19 funding. Thus, we need to work in partnership to make sure that we continue to serve those and find resources to accomplish the same thing because of the benefit provided to our students. Next slide.
So the second one is a new normal for longer. And so it's kind of challenging. I do accept your challenge, Professor Brown, to not do business as usual and to be an innovator. But it's kind of challenging because this whole phrase of the new normal, I'm sure that we're all sick of it. Put the thumbs up or put something in the chat, because I know we're tired of hearing about this new normal. But we do have to look at how it's going to be here and how we're going to deal with it. So elements of the pandemic will definitely linger for years to come. And this means that school districts and school systems, colleges and universities will have to have some sort of hybrid or blended way in place, and we have to be willing to adapt accordingly. The infrastructure for online learning and teaching, which were initially set up in this emergency panic mode, will be redefined and they'll be perfected overall, and the virtual way of working will be strengthened. The new normal made us rethink how we assess students. I think we had a great, robust conversation on this. So whether we are struggling with using lockdown browsers to make sure people aren't cheating, having parents proctor tests or exams, what this taught us is that we have to be innovative and assess students in ways that go beyond them regurgitating that memorized information back to us, but engaging them in more application-based learning and critical thinking and reflecting. A key component of education and professionalism will be the contributions that our students, staff, and faculty make to their communities and the world. And this will be reflected in recognition and assessment of students, staff, and institutions. So the Pew Research Center gathered a number of scientists, sociologists, economists, and teachers, and tech industry experts. So brace yourself for what I'm about to say. I don't want to see people's faces go down. But collectively, they suggest that the new normal might last until 2025. I'm gonna pause. So shock and awe. It doesn't sound good, but some of those same economists and tech folks and sociologists were optimists. And they said that the change spawned by the pandemic will make things better for significant portions of our population, because the changes will ensure that justice and equality are in a number of areas, and that includes education. One of these changes includes producing and technology enhancements that increase equity and make access more readily available to all communities. The improved text delivery, specifically teleeducation, will improve over time. Forced virtual schooling, where most parents were also forced into part-time homeschooling as well, forced state and public school systems to create virtual curricula, which then became available to non-local, non-physical attending schools, and even available to those students who were already engaged in homeschooling. And so completion for quality and the digital nature of the content transforms the educational system into this hybrid physical virtual system that may never go away, where access and quality of content and instructors are more focused on and they're better distributed. So parents of school-age children will be able to augment their kids' education with high-quality commercial resources, and college students will be able to come into that environment, sit down with advisors, and design their own curriculum and their path forward to completion of a college degree. For those of us who were challenged by technology in that pivot, there are going to be more challenges. But as educators, we have to ensure that technology doesn't divide us because that's also something that disempowers us. So I really like what Dr. Hall said about just not being anxious about technology when it doesn't work, when it seems like there aren't any alternatives. And I love the fact that you said you have plan A, B, C, D all the way through Z. I never even thought about engaging my faculty in that way and telling them, like, let's have plans. Let's not just cancel class, because that is indeed what happens sometimes. And so using technology to educate even more in this new normal will give us agency. It gives us our identity, our activities, and all of those things that become the means and mechanisms for us to either learn and grow, or if not used properly, continue to create friction. Being proactive when we consider this new normal for longer can open doors for more innovation and better equip us to meet the needs of our students. And so Professor Brown will look at the last one here.
And if we have that backup plan all the way from A to Z, as Dr. Hall introduced us to, we can be optimists daily, which Dr. Hall also talked about, optimists like I am. And if you are an optimist like I am, then you know that the pandemic has opened doors for a renewed and fresh look into education and for educators. The disruptions will allow us to simply go from surviving to eventually winning. And we can choose, as Dr. Hall said, joy. We can choose to win starting today. Across the board, educational systems will work to rebuild sustainable systems of teaching, doing research, which we've all done, and engaging with society. Because what we've been able to do, we will see more balance between online and physical presence. I believe that even when universities and even K-12 systems return to face-to-face education, there will be a need for increased online courses. Going back to face-to-face education will go in hand with rethinking and redesigning our educational models. We will keep the technology tools that we've incorporated, and then we will also make sure that our platforms are equitable and inclusive, especially among groups of students who would not even be able to follow a full-time in-person education. Educators will have to assess the tools, technology, resources to continue to radically transform the way in which we offer teaching, learning, and collaborative opportunities. Blended, as someone just typed in the chat, and hybrid teaching forms will become the norm. Educational programs will continue to be adapted and harness the potential of physical and virtual learning environments with new methods of interaction. The new flexibility will facilitate the acceptance and introduction of more pathway programs in 9th through 12th grade, dual enrollment programs, and of micro-credentials that will allow college students to design their own learning pathway and building throughout the curriculum. Teaching staff and administrative staff will have to strengthen their skills and become confident users of the new tools, platforms, and methods used in blended teaching, and support areas of professional growth will grow. Probably one of the most sustainable and engaging things that will be a part of the future outlook for education is reimagining what community looks like. Educators will come up with creative solutions and find new ways to connect, inspire, and fulfill the mission of our individual and collective educational systems. One thing that we do know is that education will be essential, not only in the immediate challenge of stopping the coronavirus, but also to the larger question of finding new ways to learn, teach, form communities, and solve problems within the next wave of problems that will eventually come. This is not a higher education problem or a secondary or K-12 problem. It begins in those foundational years, from the moment a child steps into the early learning stages of their lives. Educators will put forth efforts to push us through change culturally. The fracturing and demise of education is directly related to the pandemic, and lack of being prepared cannot and will not cripple this nation again if we have greater emphasis on education. So I see a bright and hopeful future ahead.
I do too. I definitely agree. So what can be gained? When it comes to women in educational leadership, it's often expressed that there's a pipeline problem, and we know that's not true. Women continue to experience resistance despite their clear and true abilities. They have been proven to get results in whatever areas that they're in, but not given the credit that's deserved. So men's gender bias and what Rebecca Schaumbach references as the sticky floor has not kept us from amassing more than half of the world's multidisciplinary master's degrees and terminal degrees. And we will continue to forge ahead. I just want to offer the following as we consider our roles in a post-pandemic environment in changing that narrative, because we have a critical role to play in changing that overall narrative of leadership and not to focus on the limitations that are in society. And so often it's easy to focus on the limitations. I think Kenda talked about the lens that we look through. And oftentimes, if we're looking at ourselves through the lens that society looks at us through, we do feel those challenges. We do feel the pressure to keep that cape on and to try to be the transformational person in a silo or all alone because we don't feel like we have that support. So don't accept the glass ceiling narrative. We can either accept it or follow those who have shattered it. We have to continue to support legislation, changes, training, social support that leads to possible changes for women. Do away with negative concepts. And so the acknowledgement of self-concept of women has always been under attack. Stereotypical classification of us, especially those in the teaching profession, have strong implications for women. They impair learning and prevent women from fulfilling their full potential. And to this end, we need to bolster the academic self-concept again, going back to changing the narrative, but speaking about women in their roles as confident, competent, and highly influential. And this flows directly into my next point, which is engaging our male counterparts. This was strategically done for Women's History Month, for women to have that voice and to be in the company of one another. But it takes our male counterparts. They have a responsibility in this fight to promote and protect gender equality. We didn't create a patriarchal society, and we should not be tasked with the burden of correcting it on our own. When everyone believes that empowering others doesn't mean that they're going to fall short, but means that we can work together and actively demonstrate that gender inequity and the support of male counterparts actually benefits us all, we move the needle forward. A recent World Bank report notes that expanding women's opportunities drives down gender inequality. And we have to celebrate the waves, not just the first. So if we think about the waves of feminism and put that into the context of how we celebrate women in leadership, this does make sense. Each wave of a movement was associated with massive change and accomplishment. And it was not just a momentary celebration of those milestones. Now, I'm not saying that we shouldn't acknowledge the trailblazers because it's significant. Women who are the first in their roles is really important. But I think greater and continued attention to the day-to-day work that we all are doing helps to make sure that those accomplishments, the creativity, and the critical services that we provide are no longer invisible and are acknowledged more broadly. We need to engage in research that supports the development of women leaders. Kenda talked about data, which she said something, the data therapy, and using data that is going to lead to something, lead to resolution, solutions, things that we can apply. And so I'm big on research as well. And when we study leadership, both the successes and challenges of leadership, we can grow awareness and ultimately drive change within our institutions and policy-making systems. And that research can take the form of both qualitative and quantitative research, which leads to the next point of that qualitative piece. We have to tell the stories. If we're not telling these stories, no one knows the great work that we're doing. But when we tell the stories, we create more seats at the table. We're inspiring people. We have more collaboration around promising solutions, and we open the door for other women to be able to step out on faith and take that leadership responsibility and take on those roles. And then we need to talk leadership from K-12 and beyond. Once we get our schools and colleges and universities filled with powerful women in leadership roles, we need to take that leadership into the political and corporate space, because we can't do education alone. It is a partnership between all of these things. Even our church groups, our politicians, corporate America, nonprofits, we all need to work together to solidify and bolster the educational systems. And in doing so, we provide opportunities for conversations about education, the importance of women in leadership, and we create roles and forge opportunities for more mentorship where disparities continue to persist.
I
I agree with everything that you've articulated, Dr. Edwards. Thank you for sharing that. As we wrap up, institutions have witnessed the possibilities that incorporating digital education can bring to their educational systems. There are opportunities to improve the quality of teaching and incorporating an active use of digital methods and tools. In this transition, the human aspect and the emotional side of education interaction cannot be disregarded. We have to have balance and focus on our mental health as well. And it will become an important component in the digital education strategy. A good quality education and teaching strategy will require adequate investment in tools, accessibility for all, appropriate content development, skills and training for teaching and administrators. We often forget about the importance of not only investing in teachers, but our administrators and our administrative staff.
I agree. Students have found a new way of interacting with their content and become active players in the learning process. And this is something that we need to continue. Students have seen that with the right support, they can improve their own ability to organize their time, be more autonomous, and thus gather additional transversal skills just by changing their learning methods. Adequate mentoring from staff and teachers becomes fundamental in this process. This requires methodologies and time to implement them, and institutions need to be supportive and reflect on how we engage in continued improvement. That concludes our presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you.
Okay, are there any questions? Thank you, Dr. Edwards and Professor Brown. Your session provided so many practical approaches and tons of helpful insights. Everyone, your participation is very much appreciated. The only thing that could make this day any better is knowing that there are things that you have learned that were helpful, and to know that you've set some intentions to do at least one thing differently, to try something new. So tell us about that in the chat. We're going to take a moment right now. If you could tell us in the chat 3 things that you have learned and at least one thing you're committed to trying in the future. We would love to hear about that. 3 things you've learned, 1 thing that you're committed to trying in the future. Let's see what we got here. Cultivating my flavor, yes.
I just put that in there.
Okay, we got the refresh, some data therapy. I love that phrase, love it. Knowing my flavors, yes. Consistent sleep and eating schedule, yes. Let me know how that works out. Baby steps, right?
Yes.
Have a daily mantra. Yes. I have a Shiro mantra that I read in the morning. Cultivate my flavor, go to bed earlier, yes. Turn off those devices. That pause, yes. And that daily, like that midday pause makes a difference too. I don't do that enough. And someone was talking about breathing. Dr. Hall, was that you talking about breathing? I've got, that holding of the breath. Does anybody else have that issue?
When you were doing your therapy, so when you did your thing about releasing your jaw, and then when Dr. Hall talked about not breathing, so I have to go to the dentist. I already sleep with the guard, but I've noticed that this side is so tense. And in taking my kids to the dentist, the doctor was explaining how, number one, we need to watch the snacking that we're doing because it doesn't give our bodies our teeth enough time to process the plaque and do it naturally. It talked about how not only clenching of the jaw, but she said your head is we don't realize our heads are so heavy. She said your heads are so heavy when you're leaning forward, the gravity is pulling you down, and that's why you clench your jaw.
Yeah.
So I had a whole dental lesson, and I was like, Lord, I'm scared for you to see my mouth next week. But I noticed that, so and I try to sit back with my feet down. Yes. But for some odd reason, you just the clenching. It's just
So when I said unclench that jaw, you noticed immediately.
I did. Yeah, so I'm going to try to take breaks to get away from the screen. do more journaling. I know Professor Brown has a great, do you want me to show it now?
Sure.
She has, I don't know if you can, so all of our participants will receive
Oh, wow,
the
that's
journal.
beautiful.
And it's beautiful. I had
That
to
is
hide
amazing.
mine because my son is a journaler and he started writing in here. And I was like, no, this is the one I keep clean.
That is beautiful.
There's,
Wow.
there are affirmations. And this is the second time, Tanya, we've done something together, and I've turned to the one with the Michael Jordan affirmation. It's so weird. This is the
Really?
second time I've done it, so that's weird. But it says, I have failed over and over and over again, and that's why I succeed. That is the second time that I've used the journal, and we turned to that page. But all of our participants will get this lovely journal. And I do want to ask our panelists if I could please edit out our break, our performance, and if I could put the video up on YouTube, because I know, and I'll send everyone the link as well as our participants. I'll send you the link once I edit it, because I think it's so much, there was so much food for thought. One minute I felt like I was at church. The next minute I felt like I was a student. This was an amazing day for me. And I'm so blessed that each of you, Tanya and I just reached out to people randomly. We found some people on the internet, some people we knew. I knew Dr. Rausser and Dr. Timmons were overwhelmed, but I was like, okay, I'm just going to ask anyway, because we're in the midst of acquiring another university. And one of the things that was already etched in stone was that we were going to go ahead and move forward with their education program. So Dr. Timmons and Dr. Rausser had been working long before everyone else at the university in terms of working with the education program and the new programs that we're adopting. Brandi, we were just like, we're going to go for her. We're just going to go ahead. We Googled, and I remember the day you emailed back, we were like, what? It took me forever to find the email address for Kenda. But Tanya and I had read all of her. We read like 3 or 4 articles about her, and just being on different shows and being interviewed by different magazines about culturally responsive pedagogy. And we emailed her, got right back to us. I know that Dr. Hall, again, in the midst of a busy semester, but everyone's participation, even my wonderful Sora Ebony, who was working overnight to improve her presentation. I'm like, girl, it was already fine, but she was working overnight. We got on Zoom early and made some changes. So I'm so appreciative to you. This has just been an amazing, amazing afternoon. For all of our panelists, don't forget to send us, check your email. I need to get some information. On here, you are powerful. I hope you are powered up. And Professor Brown, Dr. Rouse, Dr. Timmons, I don't know if y'all are ready for, part 2 planning and loss in Davis Hall. If y'all are willing to come back, I would love to celebrate Women's History Month with you all next year in the same
All right now.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Thank you.
All right now. Yes.
All right.
Thank you, everybody.
Have a blessed weekend, ladies.